Hi, everyone. This is Bob Doane, and I'm coming to you live from the Acupuncture and Wellness Center in Paulsbo, Washington. We are the largest privately owned Chinese medical clinic in the United States. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we're going to talk about the real epidemic in the United States, and it's not COVID-19, it's being overweight. Obesity, or to put it nicely, just being overweight or grossly overweight is the real epidemic in our country, and it's causing lots and lots of trouble. And that's those people with diabetes. Are diabetics thin? No, 99% of the time they're overweight. There are some exceptions to type 2 diabetes, but I would say 95% plus are overweight. So being overweight or grossly overweight goes with diabetes, and it goes actually with cardiovascular disease. And it's the cardiovascular disease people, it's the diabetics and the overweight people that are most susceptible from dying from COVID-19. So this virus, I think, has made everyone pretty aware of the importance of being healthy. Healthy meaning that your immune system is strong and vibrant. And to be really overweight really ruins that possibility. It's extremely important. If you have an extra 10 pounds on you, okay. But to have 30, 40, 50, and more, that is simply, it's a one-way ticket to a lot of serious health problems. And we know this. So if you go to the bookstore, and there's actually a whole section of the bookstore devoted to weight loss books. And it's a war. Weight loss, food, has been politicized. You have your Democrats of food, you have your Republicans of food, you have your vegetarians pumping out their their books and their papers, which are, very antagonistic against people who eat animal protein. Then you have the animal protein people who are writing their books saying the vegetarians are crazy. And then in the middle, you have the keto people, the keto diet, the fat dominated diet. And then you have the starvation or the caloric restriction people like Jenny Craig. So the point is, what the heck is, who's right, who's wrong? How do you get through this? And I think the problem is if you say, well, they're all right and moderation is the way to go, that's not true. If moderation was the way to go, we wouldn't be fat in the first place. We're making some serious mistakes about what we eat and how much we eat. But most specifically, it's what we eat is the problem. And people come to us and they want a magic Chinese herb or acupuncture for weight loss. But the truth is, it has everything to do with what you consume, actually what you eat. That's the key to staying healthy and to staying at the right weight. So then how do we swim through the Democrats and Republicans of the food business? Well, you have to look at some science and you have to have a lot of experience, because what it comes down to is what really works. Now, we've been doing weight loss for coming up on 23 years in this clinic, and we've put literally probably close to 30,000 people through weight loss plans. And we really have a very good handle on what works in real life. And that's what I'd like to share with you today, okay? Vegetarianism is one of the sections of the bookstore about the wonders of vegetarianism. I personally was a vegetarian for about 15 years. I was a vegetarian for 10 of those years, and then I was what could be called an Asian vegetarian for 5 years. I was a pure macrobiotic. I ate a pure macrobiotic diet under the direction of Michio Kushi and his teachers. So I was a vegetarian for 10 years because I lived in a monastery. It was a yogic monastery, and so the food was vegetarian. And so I have 10 years of that. I have 5 years of macrobiotics. And then I actually was a fruitarian for close to 2 years, where I just ate fruit. So I've tried about everything you can think of, and then throw in a 40-day water fast and about at least 20 10-day grape juice fasts. I did a wheatgrass juice fast. I've done probably 250 colonics. I don't know how many high enemas. I have tried everything you can think of to try to see what's best for the human body. And then, of course, all the experience practicing Chinese medicine all these years have given us a very good perspective on what really works and what's healthy. And what works should be synonymous with what's healthy. We don't want to eat in a certain way and then we become unhealthy. As for vegetarianism, it's true that when people start it, especially if you're overweight and have high blood pressure, the people will tend to feel a lot better, I would say, in the first 6 months. They feel light and full of energy and so forth. And one maybe could say that it's a good thing. Excuse me. But what happens after about 6 months? Suddenly the protein deficiency sets in, and here comes the weakness. After several years of vegetarianism, I couldn't stop twisting my ankle badly about twice a month. And this was, my ankle was constantly in pain because what happens when you're protein deficient, the ligaments and tendons of the body become very weak. And it's very difficult to maintain muscle tone. And so consequently, if I exerted myself, it was very easy to twist the ankle. If I leaned over, my jaw would drop out of socket because I lost my ligament strength here in the TMJ area. And I became very tired. And of course, the last thing you would do is blame it on the vegetarianism because vegetarianism is a clean, wholesome way of eating. But the truth is, it is weakening over time. If you ever want to convince yourself of this, go to an international vegetarian conference and look around, and it's really shocking, actually. They look profoundly unhealthy. And the ones that do look healthy are the ones that only been at it for about 6 months. So what's wrong with vegetarianism? Well, it has to do with the hormones of the body. It turns out that if you eat a lot of vegetables, certain ones are complex carbohydrates and certain ones are simple carbohydrates. Like carrots and beets are simple carbohydrates. All your, like turnips and rutabagas and parsnips, they're all simple carbohydrates. What does that mean? It means they break into sugar immediately into the bloodstream. Green vegetables break slowly into sugar. So green vegetables are classified as a complex carbohydrate. Now, why is this important? We've learned a lot over the last 40 years or 30 years about food and what actually happens to the bloodstream and to the hormonal system when we eat. And we've learned a lot about insulin. We've learned a lot about the pancreas. If you eat a simple sugar, i.e. carrots or beets, what happens is immediately the sugar shows up in your bloodstream. And when the sugar shows up in your bloodstream, your pancreas produces a lot of insulin to take that sugar into the cells of the body. That's what insulin does. And it responds to the glucose levels in your blood. We all know this. We've known this for 100 years or so. But what we've learned in the last 30 years is that insulin is the command hormone that tells the body to manufacture fat. It used to be that eating fat was the cause of people getting fat, right? It's not true. Fat has an absolutely neutral effect on the pancreas. A fatty meal or fat itself does not produce an insulin effect from the pancreas. So fat really doesn't make you fat. What makes you fat? Food that turns into sugar. What are those foods? Potatoes, grains, the kind of grains that you cook in your microwave for 10 minutes or you cook on a pot for 20 minutes. Those are all simple carbohydrates. Grains that take 45 to 50 minutes to cook, that's a complex carbohydrate. But unfortunately, the supermarkets are full of rice and barley and all this stuff. And then it says, 5 minutes in the microwave or 15 minutes on the stove. Those grains have been dehusked. In other words, the complex portion of the carbohydrate has been removed, and what's left is a simple carbohydrate because who wants to wait 45 minutes to eat rice? So most grains today that people consume are really simple carbohydrates, which means they turn into sugar immediately. So carrots and beets and all the root vegetables, that's just sugar. You're just eating sugar. The complex ones are the green vegetables. They break into sugar slowly. They don't cause a large insulin reaction. Now, what can make the body lose weight? If fat doesn't make you gain weight, and if sugar makes you gain weight, fat doesn't make you gain or lose weight. Fat's neutral. What food group makes you lose weight? Protein. And not just, not a soybean and not tofu. It's not strong enough. Animal protein forces the pancreas to produce the opposite of insulin, which is called glucagon. And glucagon is the command hormone that tells your body to burn fat. Okay? So obviously, if you want to lose weight, which is to lose fat, you want to have a protein dominant meal. Now, of course, what I'm arguing now, I'm coming down on the side of the protarians, but they're correct. That's the right way to go. And there's been many, many studies done where they compared the Mediterranean diet. That's kind of a mixed, sort of a caloric restricted diet. The Jenny Craig people, the vegetarians. Every time the protein diet comes out on top. And unfortunately, your medical profession has tried to scare people by telling them that eating a lot of meat or protein will hurt your kidneys. I can assure you there's no published study that I know of anywhere in the world that shows that eating protein will hurt your kidneys. It's a myth, okay? Now, there's another problem. If you ever go to a meat packing plant, you'll probably never want to eat meat again. That's a problem. So don't go to a meat packing plant. It's pretty disgusting. But the truth is the truth. If you eat a steak, you're going to lose weight. Now, if you eat a steak with a bunch of potatoes and then rice and a bunch of carrots, and then you have dessert, and on top of it you have a beer, you're not going to lose weight. You're going to gain weight because the food is dominated by insulin-producing food. One drink, a beer, glass of wine, a shot of whiskey, is basically equivalent to eating 2 Milky Way candy bars. So if you have 2 glasses of wine with your meals, that's 4 Milky Way candy bars. Why? Because it's fermented sugar. It's double sugar. So people who drink like this, of course, they always wonder, why don't I lose weight? Because I exercise all day long. And then they have cocktails. Well, the cocktail people who like to exercise, have you ever noticed they don't really lose weight? Everything gets firm, but they don't lose the size. And the reason they don't lose the size is because of the enormous amount of sugar they're putting into their bloodstream from alcohol. There was a book out that came out, I think, 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago. It was called The China Study. And it was like the opposite of all the books on the market that came out about protein, the benefits of eating protein, like the Zone and Protein Power. And since then, there's been a plethora of books about protein. But there's also a plethora of books about the wonders of vegetarianism. And the granddaddy of all of them is the China Study. We were, for a few months, we were actually promoting the China Study book because it was very interesting. It was fascinating. They took data from, I think, 20-some countries around the world where it shows that those countries that consume a lot of animal protein and dairy have the highest percentage of cardiovascular disease and cancer. And it's a very convincing book. However, there's one big problem, that if you actually get your hands on the raw data for which the China Study based its findings on, you'll see that they cherry-picked the raw data. How do I know? Because I really looked into it. The raw data, all the data from all these countries, does not support the premise of the China Study. In fact, if you take all the raw data of all the countries put together, there's no correlation between meat eating and dairy eating and cardiovascular disease and obesity. The authors of the China Study took a lot of liberty in choosing the data that supports their premise that vegetarianism is good for you. And those authors have been challenged by some very good scientists, some from Stanford and other places, where they question, hey, why didn't you choose the data from this country and this country? Why did you leave out this and why did you leave out that? And quite frankly, they simply cannot answer those questions. If you look at the field of paleopathology, we also have some insight. You can take a skeleton from, several thousand years ago, and you can determine what that person ate. And it's a fascinating field. It's called paleopathology. And we have, literally 500,000 mummies, skeletons underneath the ground in Cairo. And so they're doing a lot of analysis of these mummified bones to determine what the people ate or what they died of, and what their longevity was. And what they found is pretty shocking, that the Egyptians didn't live more than about 31 years on average, and they died almost exclusively of atherosclerosis, which is inflamed coronary arteries. Okay? And the Egyptians kept very accurate records of what they eat, and what they ate was carbohydrates. They ate a lot of bread. They ate a little bit of fish, and a little bit of birds, and a little bit of fruit, but mostly carbohydrates. They ate a lot of bread, and in the Greek army, when they fought the Egyptians, referred to them as the bread eaters, because the Egyptians would show up in their chariots with the chariots piled high with unleavened bread, which they were living on. And it's that bread that did them in, because that bread, is basically sugar. If you do analysis of the bones of cavemen, if you can find them, and they find them, the average lifespan of a caveman was about 61 years. And that's if they, weren't eaten by an animal. But if they actually died of sort of what would be called natural causes in those days, the average lifespan was about 61 years. When the world began to farm was about 8,000 years ago. That's when we began to grow grains and corn and so forth. And the hunter-gatherers began to settle down, because now they could literally grow their food and harvest it and eat it. And at that point in time, the longevity of the human being crashed dramatically. The average age of the ancient farmers was, in fact, 30, 31, 32 years, which corroborates with the Egyptian findings. So it's very clear that once you cut the animal protein out of your diet, you're going to have a lot of problems in terms of atherosclerosis and obesity. We think of very overweight people, like in the 1800s in Britain, the wealthy, and they ate a lot of fat and meat and so forth. And the poor people didn't have the money to buy that stuff, and so the poor were supposedly thin, and the wealthy people were overweight. That had more to do with the amount that they ate, and drinking and the alcohol and so forth, and not so much what they were eating. Today, because of science, we have a lot of very clear understanding what takes place when you eat food. As a vegetarian for many years, we thought that eating lentils and rice together is a pure protein. In fact, in a laboratory, it really is. If you mix lentils and rice and you do the analysis, there's enough amino acids from both of them together to produce a complete protein. Unfortunately, that's not the case when you eat the food. When you eat lentils and protein together, there's a very large spike in insulin in the bloodstream, and here comes the weight gain. And I think vegetarians who are not overweight, the reason why they're not overweight is just they don't eat a lot. I mean, I only ate one meal a day, so of course we would, I weighed 119 pounds. It's impossible to be overweight in a yogic monastery, okay? So animal protein forces the pancreas to produce glucagon, carbohydrates force the pancreas to produce insulin, and fat is neutral. So what's the best diet? The best diet is the diet that produces the greatest amount of nutrient. Now, we've learned that there's a lot of nutrient in food and fruit, and there's a lot of nutrient in vegetables, and there is, except the amount of nutrient in a steak is like a wheelbarrow full of vegetables. There is a ton of nutrient, B vitamins, everything you can think of in animal protein. It's amazing. And so you're not going to be, vitamin deprived by eating animal protein. So the question is, how much should we eat? That's the big question. And we've found the answer here over a lot of experimentation over many, many years. And here's how we do it. If you are overweight and you want to lose weight, okay, what do you eat? The biggest thing on the plate should be animal protein. And what's less should be green vegetables. If you eat the animal protein, like 60% of the plate, or 70, 80, even 90% of the plate, and then 40, 30, 20, or 10% of the plate is green, are green vegetables, then the pancreas will continually produce glucagon. And if you're eating 3 meals a day, you're going to get these glucagon rushes continuously, almost 24/7, and the body will burn fat. You won't lose muscle, you will lose fat. And it's dramatic. You'll lose 10 pounds a month. How do we know? We just know. We know. We've done this. Almost everybody in my clinic, I live in an area where there's a lot of obesity. I would say 70% of the population here is grossly overweight. So we just know. This thing never fails. You will lose weight. And what else can you have on the plate? Nothing. Quite frankly, nothing. No potatoes. Potatoes produce insulin. No rice. Rice produces insulin. No grains of any kind. No nuts and no peanut butter. Why? Because nuts and peanut butter are fat. Well, fat's good. Yeah, fat's good. But the problem is, if you put a lot of fat with the protein and the green vegetables, you will not lose weight. You won't gain weight, but you won't lose weight because there's just too much calories associated with fat. Okay? So in the beginning, when you want to lose weight, no nuts, no peanut butter, no nut butters, no milk. Milk produces insulin. Plain yogurt, any kind of yogurt, including plain yogurt, the insulin goes up in your bloodstream. Therefore, yogurt is being metabolized as a carbohydrate. No ice cream, that's definitely a carbohydrate. And cheese, we want to stay away from. Why? Because mostly it's a fat. It's not a protein. It's a fat, mostly fat, and therefore it stops the weight loss. You won't gain weight, but you won't lose weight. So we take away the cheese. And you cannot have any fruit. Fruit is a candy bar. Fruit is just sugar. So if you load up on fruit, you won't lose weight. If you eat fruit and meat together, you won't lose weight, but you won't gain weight. You'll just kind of chop sideways, but you won't lose weight because the sugar produces enough insulin to counterbalance the glucagon being caused by the meat eating. And when I say meat, I don't necessarily mean you have to eat red meat. It can be fish or chicken or turkey. Eggs. Eggs are great. Or red meat. Okay? It doesn't have to be red meat, but red meat's fine. But so is chicken and fish, shellfish. All of it's good. It's all protein, including eggs. So what do we do with the patient? For breakfast, they have eggs, bacon and eggs, ham and eggs, sausage and eggs, turkey bacon if they want it. For lunch and dinner, the majority of the plate is an animal protein of their choice, and green vegetables is smaller on the plate. That ensures the weight loss. When they've lost all the weight and they don't want to lose any more, then the meat becomes smaller, the chicken or the fish becomes smaller on the plate, and the vegetables become larger. And now they can have any vegetable they want. They can bring back the beets and the carrots and the root vegetables because the meat on the plate will counteract the effect of those vegetables. They can bring back fruit in season. But we tend we recommend don't eat bananas because bananas are just a candy bar, basically. It's just too much sugar. It's really that easy. It's not very difficult. People wanting to lose weight, we have them avoid red beans and black beans and brown beans because beans cause an insulin reaction. They can eat green beans. Green beans are a complex carbohydrate. Now, what about juicing? What about the whole juicing thing? That's another section of the bookstore. I juiced my food for almost 2 years. Now we know if we take a vegetable, let's say you take a spinach, and you blend it or you juice it. What happens to the spinach? It becomes pure sugar with a lot of vitamins and minerals in it, but it is sugar. Why does that happen? Because a complex carbohydrate like spinach or broccoli or lettuce, it takes a long time when you eat it in its real form, it's a natural form, whether it's raw or cooked. It takes quite a bit of time for the digestive system to break up the cellulose in those vegetables. And so the sugar that's locked into the cellulose is slow to be released over time into your bloodstream. That's why it's a complex carbohydrate. But if you blend those vegetables or juice them, you destroy the cellulose. You release all the sugar into solution, and now you might as well just have a beer because you're just drinking sugar. Juicing is sugar. If you want to lose weight, it's not the way to go. Okay? What about the caloric people? What about Jenny Craig? That's just caloric restrictions. You're just not eating very much. If you don't eat very much and you continue to consume the same amount of energy, then you can lose weight. The problem with these methods, as soon as you start to eat, you'll gain the weight right back again. So the caloric starvation is not a very good way to do it, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. The human being is a mammal, right? And we all have pets. We have dogs and cats, and we love them. So if you tell your dog, okay, Fluffy, we're going to feed you about half what you normally eat because you've gotten too fat, and then we're going to make you run, and we're going to work you really hard to lose your weight. Fluffy's not going to like that. First of all, Fluffy's going to get very tired. Fluffy will not want to work very hard because you're not feeding him very much. Okay? You take a horse, a plow horse, and you feed it half the amount that it normally gets and make it work more, the horse will become very unhealthy. It's the same with the human being. It's a faulty reasoning, okay? If you work someone really hard, whether it's an animal or yourself, what happens to you? You're hungry and you want to eat, okay? Now you can eat, but if you eat all those carbohydrates, you're going to gain weight even though you're exercising. But if you eat that animal protein along with some green vegetables, you'll lose the weight. It's that simple. And, to be a vegetarian basically for 17 years, it took me quite a bit to see the light. And, but when you're practicing medicine, you really want people to get healthy. And at some point, it just becomes obvious. I once gave a lecture here locally where it was a lunch and learn, where we sort of pay for everybody's lunch. And then while they're eating lunch, we talk to them about various health topics. That was one of the most amazing experiences for me because it was a smorgasbord so they can get all the food they want. And then they would sit at the table and then I would give my lecture, right? I never saw anything like that. Many of the people had 2 plates of food stacked this high with food where the food's falling off on the table, and they had 2 of these plates and they began to eat. And they'd eat one and then they'd eat the other one. And granted, some of them were a good, 300 pounds, 350 pounds. And then they wanted me to analyze their health afterwards. So they would sit down and I would talk to them privately. And in some of the conversations, because I saw what they ate, I said, look, you gotta eat less. I don't eat anything. I don't know why I'm this fat. I really don't eat. They actually told me that when I watched them eat 2 of the biggest piles of food plates I've ever seen in my entire life. So much food, it was falling off on the table. If you are 300 pounds, the amount of calories that takes that you have to put in your body to maintain that weight, you have to eat a lot, unless you have a serious endocrine disease, which most people don't have, okay? It does happen where people are just grossly obese and it really is not food. It's an endocrine problem, which means insulin. So you want to lose weight, that's the secret. It really is. And I'm sorry about the vegetarianism, but it doesn't produce the results. It really doesn't. And over a long period of time, you will get weak. I owned a television station in Beverly Hills in the 1970s, Channel 18, Global Television Inc. I was the president. I put that station on the air in 1976, and I was still a vegetarian. And I made myself the news director, and I had to shoot the news in the evening live. And by the late afternoon, I'd be so tired, I'd have to go home and take a nap to shoot the news with some degree of vitality. Why? A lot of vegetables and a lot of sugar, okay? Because vegetarians, you eat your meal, which is mostly sugar, and then you have some dessert, which is sugar. Eat a lot of bread, sugar. Bread is just devastating. It's the wheat is not really natural wheat anymore. It's this shorty wheat. It's genetically altered. The body doesn't really recognize the wheat meat very well, so most people are allergic. The wheat, the body's usually allergic to the wheat, so you have allergic reactions to eating the wheat, and then it turns into sugar. and the sugar causes insulin. Insulin causes weight gain. So I've painted a broad brushstroke of the topic here, but I haven't held anything back. I'm just telling you what works. And will your cholesterol go up? Yeah, sometimes it goes up, but sometimes it goes down. Is the increased cholesterol a big problem? We don't think so. The research is replete around the world that lowering your cholesterol will not save you from cardiovascular disease. I mean, there's a lot of research. It's overwhelming. If you lower your cholesterol by eating non-cholesterol food and a lot of oatmeal and things like that, will your cholesterol drop? Yeah, it will. Or can you lower your cholesterol with drugs? Of course. But the research is very clear that the increase in your lifespan by avoiding a future cardiovascular disease is about 3 days. That's right, 3.2 days. So I wouldn't worry too much about what happens to cholesterol, whether it goes up or down. Because remember, cholesterol doesn't stick to the inside of the coronary artery unless the inside of the coronary artery is inflamed. Then the cholesterol will stick to try to heal the lesion on the inside of the coronary artery. What produces the lesion on the inside of the coronary artery? Glucose, sugar. So those of you who eat a lot of sugar, you're going to end up with inflamed coronary arteries, and then the cholesterol will stick, and then you end up with atherosclerosis. Now there's restrictive blood supply into the heart wall. The pumping action of the heart gets weaker and weaker and weaker. You get fatter and fatter. You start to hold a lot of water. And then here comes congestive heart failure, not to mention diabetes. Now with that happy note, it's good news, folks. You just eat more protein, real protein. It doesn't have to be a steak, fish and chicken and eggs and a smaller amount of green vegetables. Lay off the dairy products and don't eat the fruit and the potatoes and all that. And in 3 months, you'll lose 30 pounds. Then all you have to do, you can bring back some of that stuff that you've been avoiding, but just make sure that you never, ever take the animal protein off the plate. If you do, you will gain the weight right back again. Okay? So hopefully that's helpful. I tried to give a lot of information for you. If you're interested, anybody's interested in our services, just go to our website, acupuncturewellness.net. And there's a big button there that says make an appointment. It will take you to some paperwork. Don't freak out about the paperwork. We just ask you 3 questions. We just want to know a little bit about what's bothering you. Then we will call you. We will not charge you. I will talk to you a little bit to try to figure out what's wrong, what's your story. And if we can help, then we will lay out a little plan for you. We can treat people, teletreatments through Zoom or on the telephone. If you're anywhere within the area of 100 miles or more, 200 miles, then usually we can see you. We usually only have to see you once, and we'll figure it out. And then we lay out a health plan for you. And the health plan, we're on everything: pain, weight, vascular problems. We treat everything, okay? And we'll do our very best to help you, okay? So stay safe in this time. Practice your social distancing, and hopefully we'll all be back to work pretty soon. Have a great day, folks. My very best to you. Okay, bye-bye now.